have a pint and we talk about politics, believe it or not. And last week I was in Liverpool, went on tour, and you should watch that show actually because it was really good. It was one of the best ones we've had. So if you get a chance, have a look. It's on YouTube now as well. Socialist Telly on YouTube. So it's worth having a look at last week's episode. But I think tonight's going to be really good as well. We have so we're back at home and we're not on tour, but we are going to be talking about community organising tonight. And obviously, it's been in the news to a certain extent. Obviously there was the news that broke last week that there would be a termination of the contracts of the community organising unit in the Labour Party. That's caused a bit of controversy. There's been a lot of discussion on Twitter and so on. My view is that the Labour Party does need a community organising kind of embedded into it. Obviously there's different ways of doing that, but it seems that a bit short-sighted to let that go at this particular point, especially when we're potentially just coming out of COVID. So we'll see how that one works out. But tonight was really also about talking at a sort of deeper level about what community organising is. To have a bit of a debate about it, because I think there's lots of different models and there's different ways of doing it, and to try and generate some of that discussion. So tonight I have Tina McKay, who's a former parliamentary candidate for Colchester in 2019. She's now living up in Edinburgh in Scotland. And Tina, you are the first guest to be invited back. How does that feel?
Oh, am I? Oh, I'll take that one then.
I was wondering whether it is. Well, I was wondering whether it was because you were too polite last time.
All righty,
you'll have to be a bit more outrageous tonight.
Yeah, because last time I was doing dry January, so I was completely sober.
Oh yeah, it was. Yeah. So it's really good to have you back on, and I know you've been involved in a lot of community organising initiatives, and you have some opinion. By the way, it's actually snowing on me through the loft hatch. So if I go like that, that's the snow. Okay, and Tina, did I see on your Facebook just Tina McKay updates on Facebook that you actually enjoyed a run the other day?
Oh God, I felt that I needed to mark this. You know, when you get these like memories a year down the line and 2 years down the line where things come back, and I thought, considering, you know, as I did this begrudgingly, and Neil, I'm not too sure whether you know about this, but Ben started doing these posts about, you know, how great he was coping with doing the couch to 5K, and I think it was probably about, I don't know, 2/3 of the way in of Ben doing it, where he started to kind of look half decent. I was like, this seems to be working for Ben. So I thought, right, well, if that old dodger, you know, who's got arthritis can manage to do this, I'm going to have to do this. So that's how I started.
I've been following you. It's you and Eddie Izzard kind of duking it out on social media.
Well, that's why I got into it. So I have never enjoyed it. I hate running. I really have hated every moment of doing it. But the other day, I actually found myself running around. I've started listening to podcasts now while I'm running. And I came back and thought, you know what? I really enjoyed that. And I don't know, I needed to maybe take my temperature as well, because I'm sure that maybe, you know, there's definitely something wrong with me anyway, but certainly after enjoying a run. So I felt I needed to document it so that if I never in my life ever enjoyed a run again, one day I'll get that reminder that said, oh, I enjoyed a run today.
Yeah. This is a whole new Tina, you know. Anyway, talking of that, what are you drinking tonight?
Actually, I last time I was on, it was dry January, and I had this like fake IPA, which was absolutely horrific. Tonight I've got two actually tonight. One of them is from a local brewery just down the road, Lonehead, and funny enough, you'll both laugh at this because the name of it is Radical Road. And my other one then is just a more kind of what you'll all know as Beavertown neck oil. But
all right, is that your safety drink?
No, this one was actually, and attributing all this to you as well, Ben, because you started me on this road to like IPAs. But neck oil was the first one that I tried in a little bar in Edinburgh called Sneaky Pete's. That's nothing like me at all. But yeah, so Radical Road and a bit of neck oil. That's me tonight.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. And Neil, hiya Neil.
Hello.
You're right.
Yeah, good.
And Neil, on your Twitter, you call yourself a restless optimist.
Yeah, that's about right. I mean, it took me a long time to kind of like, condense it to those two words, but I think that covers it well.
It reminded me of like the Gramsci quote of the pessimism of the intellect and the optimism of the will sort of thing. Is that the general idea?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I didn't obviously have the intellect to say it like that, but I think that covers it well.
So you're up in Bradford now, that's right, is it?
I am, yeah. If you look behind me, that sign says putting the rad back in Bradford, so I am in Wibsey in South Bradford.
Excellent. But you worked with Tina a little bit down in Colchester, so how did that come about?
Well, I was born and brought up very close to here, but I went on a very long journey when I went to Kent University and then lived in London. Then I moved to Australia for 10 years. And, a lot of things I might talk about have been informed by some of my experiences there and in Asia. And then I came back to the UK and moved to Colchester. And that's where I met Tina. And I had the privilege of, meeting her, and just as that election started, and I don't know if it's the privilege of being involved in that, because it was a bit of a kind of, we all know what happened, right? But it was like any attritional situation, it was a bonding experience, So
yeah. Yeah. And you've written a book called The Participation Revolution, haven't you? And I just want to read the subtitle because I think it's quite good. How to Ride the Waves of Change in a Terrifyingly Turbulent World. So, I mean, I was just thinking about that. You wrote that a little while ago, right? So has it become more terrifying and turbulent since?
Well, I don't think so. I just looked at historical patterns, and so I don't want to seem like I'm a smart ass or I've got a crystal ball, but it seemed like this was going to happen. So I might have been a bit readier for it. I wasn't expecting it to be a pandemic, but it did look like we're entering, we're going down this kind of like curve into a very turbulent time. And you see this happen every 200 or 300 years in history, and so I thought it would happen. It doesn't make it any easier, but so it might have been a little bit more prepared. And and to some extent, it's not good news for a lot of people, but it's good news for my hypothesis that I was actually correct.
And what are you drinking tonight?
I am a teetotaler, so I have tea,
right.
Yorkshire tea.
Tea.
Yeah.
That's been quite a popular drink, actually. To be fair, I'm really impressed with the diligence and the discipline of the socialist movement. If it was if it was this right across our movement, we'd be up at 7 o'clock every morning organising and everything.
You think that's bad?
Did have a complete.
You're pointing at some important things here. Out the pubs, into the tea shops, and then to the barricades.
Yeah.
Do you know what? So no, I mean, I'm all for a cup of tea. I love my tea and I love my coffee in the morning, but there's nothing better than having a good natter in the pub over a few pints and talking politics, maybe where you shouldn't. It's always supposed to be banned from the pub, but it's always the best in the pub. And I've got to say, maybe it's the Irish in me, but a Sunday night was always the best night in the pub for the crack, 100%. So that's why I'm enjoying my few beers tonight, and I'm going okay. I'm only having a few, so not doing too bad.
Yeah.
I just want to add to that. We may talk about it, but in terms of what Tina did in Colchester, she completely, exceeded expectations in terms of the number of votes and everything she got. And she's a good socialist, and she wore a donkey jacket and had a red bobble hat. She's the real deal. She's talking now about beer, but I have to say, me and her spent a lot of time in tea shops drinking fine tea and eating cakes. So she does.
Good stuff. I'll just say I'm drinking what's called key lime lager.
Oh.
Right, which is Tiny Rebel brew that.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like it's a sort of it does remind you of your youth and lager and lime, but it's not quite as sweet as that. So it's actually really quite nice.
It's a shandy, basically, isn't it? That's what you're saying.
Well, it tastes a bit like a shandy, yeah. But it's good. It's good stuff. Right, okay, we better get cracking, haven't we? Because we only have an hour and it goes really quickly. And I think the both of you have a lot of interesting things to say about community organising. I've spoken to you both kind of through Facebook posts and all sorts of stuff about some of this and privately as well. So I just wanted to start with. Everybody talks about community organising as if it's one monolithic thing. We just need to, get community organising into the Labour Party or into our communities, but obviously it's an incredibly complex thing. So you've got different models. You've got Citizens UK and Acorn in this country. You've got the Saul Alinsky type organising in the States. And I just wondered if we could start with you, Tina, maybe when if somebody talks about community organising, it can be like 100 different things. But what does it mean to you? How would you summarise it?
I think you're right in saying like it is, that there's so many different levels of it, and I think obviously my most recent experience has been the more the approach that the Labour Party had, which we'll get into that a bit later, but. For me, it was actually one of the biggest kind of drivers whenever I was standing to be elected as the parliamentary candidate for Colchester. Community organising was something that was really central to my platform, and Neil and I have spoken about this at many times. This is where we both kind of connected on this desire, this need, this sort of passion about communities and the need to drive things forward. And for me, community organising it's really about trying to you're basically setting up like a huge network of people and trying to link people together in developing and sort of making sure that your community, whether it is by area or whatever that may be, is all sort of working together for something more positive to happen. Whether you're fighting against something or whether you're working towards something, it's about the fact that if you have more than one voice and you're together in doing that, you've got more of a chance of success. And it's, I suppose, in a very sort of basic way, it's a bit like a union. If you've got a union of people together doing something, you've a greater chance of success. So for me, it was all, I think I was coming at it more from the approach of like the fight back against austerity. So I wasn't, community organising isn't something that I was, thinking about, 25 years ago. This is, for me, community organising has come about thinking about how there has been a decay and a decline and how can we, fight back. But I think, where my sort of approach and maybe where Neil's will be slightly different is that I feel that there has to be a political element to community organising. I don't see it as being something that's separate or something that is done and then you have politics. For me, it's very much that there's a marry between the two, that there has to be that sort of involvement of the political as well as, the more, just community organising approach.
Yeah, I mean, we'll come on to that a bit later as well. I mean, interesting what you said there about it being like a union. I noticed that Acorn call themselves a union, don't they? And I think that's interesting. And I've come from a background. My kind of experience of community organising was very much through the trade union movement. So I have like a sort of different approach, I think, from other. So it's like sometimes about kind of identifying workplace leaders and kind of building a coalition around an issue and stuff like that. But but I'm aware that like mine's quite limited. And Neil, you're kind of, you've learned your community organising kind of knowledge and skills, all over the world. And how would you say you would differ from that? What kind of features would be in your kind of ideal model of community organising, or is there one?
Well, Well, first of all, it's kind of very simple. If we boil it down, it's worth saying that community organising is obviously organising communities. That might sound really obvious, but the definition of community is interesting. That community is often seen as like a neighbourhood, and quite often, for some reason, the word community gets applied to like poor neighbourhoods. Where a community is a group of people that have something in common. So you can have a community that's dispersed geographically around a scientific subject, or football fans are a great example of a community. So simple terms is, how do we organise groups of people to do things? I think it's worth kind of saying that. And I think something I've noticed, which has become epidemic, I think, because of social media, is. And in this, I think, is success for the new political parties of the future. You've got to get their heads around this. And if you go into a bar and watch people watching football on TV, what you will see is usually men, maybe up where you are, wearing Newcastle shirts with a pint, yelling at the TV. And what they think they're doing by yelling at the TV, they actually think they're influencing the game. Some of them actually think they're playing the game.
Yeah.
But they're not. And if you go to any football game, there's 50, 60, 70,000 people in the Premier League, shouting as if they're playing the game, but there's only 22 people playing the game, right? That's where the action's happening.
I'm disgusted at this, by the way. I won't accept this.
So the problem with politics at the moment is, and social media does this, lots of people yelling and shouting, and it makes no difference. What makes difference, what the difference we want to make is impact on the ground. And I think that's where community organising comes about. It's not about organising groups of people to vote for your party. Yeah. It's about organising groups of people to have the impact that you are committed to, that you believe in. And I think it's something that we really need to instill in our communities, now talking about towns and cities, is the ability for people to learn how to organise people to do good things together, rather than be in conflict with each other. So that's kind of a potted version of what I think it is.
I think the other thing is that, that's maybe where Neil and I would be really similar in this approach, is maybe slightly different to yours, Ben, is that I don't think that you need to be a community leader or someone who's already in a position of leadership to actually be the person organising. I think, the beauty, and I think something that maybe gets lost in certain approaches to community organising, is that you look for someone who already has a voice. Whereas I think what community organising does is community organising gives everybody an opportunity to be part of that and to maybe be that leader in the end of a particular cause or whatever it is that you're organising a community for. And I think that's where sometimes a more formal approach can go wrong, is that you end up excluding people who may have a real capability of being, really successful within community organising, really successful for a cause. And I think that's part of what I think people need to harness, is that anybody who's involved in the community has the capability to be able to make something really good of that community.
Yeah. So are you saying that one of the dangers, I suppose, is that you go into a community and you're kind of like an alien in a way, but you then nominate that person who then ends up being the gatekeeper, to that community.
Yeah. So for example, I mean, you've heard me saying this, and I say this quite a lot on social media. I was really incredibly lucky. If we look at the sort of more formal side of what community organising came to Colchester, which was the community organising, it was something that we were trying to do through without having the formalised structure. But obviously, when you get the opportunity of getting somebody who's funded to come and help you, you're going to grab that. And I got someone who was absolutely just completely born to do community organising. And although aside from the fact that the way Labour were doing it maybe wasn't so well structured, this person just really grasped it, and he was able to see that what community organising is, and especially what it should be in certainly at the beginning, and it should take quite a while, is that you're listening to communities. And that when you take the time to listen to the communities, you find the people through that. So you don't go looking for someone who's, of course, people who are already active are incredibly important in whatever community organising you're doing, but you shouldn't exclude the other people within that community from maybe getting an opportunity to take a more forward approach. And I think that, my community organiser, I should say the community organiser we had in Colchester was fantastic at doing that, was listening to people. And you know, he was able to take the time to go and do that, whereas maybe a lot of other people who are volunteers who don't have much time, he was able to go and do that as a job, and able to spend loads of time just, you know, going into delving into every community that you could get access to and finding people within it. And you know, for me, that, you know, if you listen enough to people, you find out what the needs are, what the wants are, what are the, you know, if you're looking at it from even the negative point, what the struggles are within a community. And if you do that, then you can connect enough people to be able to utilize and form a cohort and be able to, you know, work together to get whatever outcome it is that you desire.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I did my organising training through the TUC, and there was this exercise that we just did on a kind of weekly basis where we had to like role play, but you had to, it was just dead cringe, but it was interesting because what you had to do was you know, you had to be the organizer, and then you had to listen for, you know, 70% of the time, I think, or 80% of the time, and it was just so difficult for people. So you had you had 15 trade unionists in a room, you know, trying to you know, listen, and it was just impossible. And I just wondered, like, because I'm always thinking about, I suppose, like, I am always thinking about how the left adapt and how the left, you wonder whether there's a kind of culture on the left that we want to say stuff, we want to kind of dominate conversations. I mean, I know we've talked about this in the culture of meetings and things like that on this program before, and I wonder if that kind of, Neil, do you think that that culture of the left kind of plays a part in making it difficult? Because you're you know, what Tina says about like listening and going in there listening, it sort of I think for some people it feels counterintuitive, and I'd admit that, you know, I struggle with that sometimes as well.
Yeah, well, I think, yeah, my view, I've been involved in culture change a lot, and what is interesting about cultures is they don't like to change, and when you try and change a culture, what you tend to get is a backlash, you know. And I believe this is what happened in the Labour Party in the last few years. The thing that I was very excited by when Jeremy Corbyn became leader was a paper I read called From Paternalism to Participation. Now, given I've written a book called The Participation Revolution, you can see why I might be interested in it, right? And I think, you know, I don't know if we could say there's three major political parties anymore, but the two major political parties and the other ones, really, other than the Brexit Party, and we should talk about them because I think they are really, forgetting about their politics, are a very interesting example of a new way of operating. But all the political parties are top-down, hierarchical and paternalistic. So it's like, we have to come and organize you people. There's nothing more patronizing than that. You call yourself a socialist, and it's like, I can come into your community and sort it out for you, you know. So I think it's a mindset shift from paternalism to, and I don't know what a good word is, because the word that tends to get used is empowerment, and the problem with that word is it sounds a bit wanky, basically. But that's what it's about. You know, the community organizer is the person that can enable, can power, can coach, can orchestrate in such a way that they're like a great coach of a football team. Go back to that metaphor, because they're not on the pitch, you know. So forget about what happens before the game. You know, when the game is happening, they're not on the pitch. So, you know, but they're obviously providing things that allow that team to perform at a high level. And I think that's where we now need to start thinking from in terms of what communication.
I completely agree with Neil there, and that's where I'm saying that, where I don't know what other community organisers were like in the more formalised structure of the Labour Party, but I know that the one I had did exactly that, Neil. It wasn't about coming in and sorting people out. And I have to confess, I mean, Neil, you can attest to this, and Ben as well, that there were times where I was under incredible pressure. And I can remember, and I really feel sorry for Imad. Imad was the community organiser, because I can remember at one stage where I was just so stressed, and I was like, why the fuck won't you just tell me what to do, you know? And it was like, that was completely the opposite approach. And he never did that. He obviously knew I was really stressed. I was like, let's think about this, Tina, you know? But he was completely of the opinion that, you know, when you listen, when you keep doing that, and it's so true, when you find what it is that people need within a community. And it wasn't about us. What he was very clear of, and I think this goes back to, Neil, your point that when you say about people and cultures not wanting to change, was that our approach in Colchester wasn't just about Labour members. So it wasn't just Labour members that came to the community organising or the community organising training. It was completely open to anybody within the community. And of course, there were some Green members there. There were, you know, and that the whole point was that you're not going to create change. And Neil and I spoke about this quite a bit. You're never going to create change in a community if you only speak to or engage a certain amount of that community. That you've got to bring people in. You've got to bring people in from all sorts of campaigns, you know, from parties if you can, but you've got to engage everybody to be able to effectively, you know, create that change and to be a success. So for me, I think I was incredibly lucky, and I say this, you know, and I'll, you know, I got what I would say would have been the best approach to community organising, but, and I have to say this, and you know, I feel, you know, there was a huge resistance to it. There was a huge resistance to it within the local party. And a lot of the older sort of members were the people who were like, well, you know, we can do this. We don't need to be told. And I'd be like, well, why haven't you been doing it then? You know, why haven't we been really active in our communities? And I think, you know, that we all have to be able to, if we want to move forward, and if you're looking at the Labour Party, which, you know, that's up to whoever wants to do it that way, they need to look at how they can create that change, that acceptance, that culture change within the party. Although instead of doing that, they're just wiping it out now and saying we don't need that anymore. So they're going down the completely wrong road. But for me, it's a huge opportunity. And I mean, if the Labour Party don't do it, who is going to do it then? And you know, this is where I, you know, kind of come back to my first point that I made, was that without the politics, I don't think community organising can really affect and make lasting change, that you need to have the politics with it.
Okay. Neil, do you want to just quickly respond to that? I mean, I'm also just wondering what you think about, and I'm playing devil's advocate slightly as well. So it's two questions, I suppose. But is that I agree with you about the kind of, you know, that everybody should have a voice, and that's the point of community organising. But is there a danger then that like nothing gets done because the structures are so flat? Sorry,
this is the problem. It's talking, right?
Yeah.
Talking is why probably the major political parties in this organization, in this country, will fail, right? It's because they're used to just talking. We need to move into a world of doing, right? Is that, you know, anyone can have an opinion about things, and they're really worthless. A community organizer is someone who can make shit happen, who can socially impact. It's a social entrepreneurial mindset, really. So if you look at, you know, where I live, I live in Bradford South, you know, so if you go Bradford West, it's where George Galloway played Merry Hell. If you go south, it's Batley, where, you know, Joe Cox was tragically killed by a far right member. If you go north, it's Keighley, which is a Labour seat, that, you know, red wall seat that went blue in the last election. You know, this is an area where, you know, the battleground, if you like, you know, walk into these places, you know, with a Labour rosette on and say, hey, you know, I want to do this, that, and the other. It's like, you know, where have you been? You know, what people need here is to see people like, and I'll give you a great example, a Labour councillor called Richard Dunbar, who is a councillor for Thornton, which is just outside Bradford. You know, he's in his community helping set up the local cafe, helping organise the cooperative, helping organise the COVID response. That's community organising. Yeah. Now, if you see that happening with someone who happens to be a member of the Labour Party, then you've got some credibility. So it's doing leadership. It's not talking leadership. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but I think that the important thing is, and you'll know what I'm getting at when I say this, Neil, is that if you are doing, if you're a representative of the Labour Party and you're doing this within your community for, because you're a Labour representative, it should be that you're promoting the Labour message. It shouldn't be about the individual who is, I'm doing this because I'm such and such, you know, and I think, you know.
The Labour message. The point is, you know, if we go back to the word socialism, you know, it's got social in there, and if you go back to the root of the word socialism, social and society, it means groups of people getting on together.
Yeah,
So I think
but
the
I
Labour
think
message is that it's not the
indeed, but
message.
but I think it's got to be about bringing other people with you. It's not just about you creating your empire and being seen as the person who's doing all this great stuff. I think, I think it's about bringing more people to do it, and then that way you actually have more of an impact.
Well, certainly the people I'm talking about aren't like that. They're people that want to make things happen. And I don't know, there's always egos and everything. There's always show-offs. There's always people who will step in, when the photo opportunity comes along, put the high-res vest and a hard hat on, and they've never worn one in their life, so they're a complete tosser, right? The person who really cares, right? I mean, if we really do believe that people are, that we don't believe in a patronizing class system, if we actually believe that people are intelligent, then people are intelligent enough to see through that bullshit, and so that's what I see. Certainly when people are organizing and they're doing it, they might do some social media, but they're not doing the social media and then buzzing off again. So that's what I'm talking about.
So Neil, you mentioned when we were talking about doing this program that you talked about focusing on need, rather than the politics within local needs. So at the moment, the needs are around kind of food banks and I suppose communication, mental health, stuff like that. And I suppose my question would be, well, partly like as we come out of lockdown, because they're very specific, those needs, aren't they, during lockdown?
I don't agree those are the needs. I don't think they are the needs, actually.
Okay. All right. Yeah, sorry. You explain.
Ultimately is hope. The needs of the communities to feel like they belong, and the needs of communities to feel connected and looked after and safe. Those are the needs of a community. And some of the things you talked about are vehicles for that. There are mechanisms for that.
Okay. That's interesting, because that was going to be my kind of that is my worry. Let's say that that what we do is we provide kind of physical, sticking plasters to situations, and I suppose this ties in a little bit with what Tina's saying, and almost become like a kind of big society model, but you're not talking about that. You're talking much more fundamental about kind of the feeling and the common sense within communities and so on.
Yeah, and I think people, if we make big society work, who cares? Because
I do massively.
But that's what I mean. But what I mean is, the point of big society is a stakeholder society that everyone's involved in. Now,
but it's not. It's about papering over the cracks to carry on with the
label and the politics. What I mean is, I honestly don't care. I don't care about any of these labels. What I care about is making a positive impact in my community, and that's what we should all be caring about. That's all we should be caring about.
But if you remove,
who's doing it and whose idea it is. So.
But the thing is, it's not about the idea; it's the approach that's wrong. And if you don't, this is where I say about if you remove the politics from it, what we end up doing is just constantly papering over the cracks and sorting the problem, or sorry, never sorting the problem. You're just, the impact, the impact of the politics.
We can talk about everything, but at the moment we're talking about community organizing, right?
But it's as a response to the issues that society faces. That's what communities organize, because they're organizing against something that's happening. Their community needs something, it needs to be improved, whatever it may be.
Again, you're talking division, you're talking fighting. Forget fighting. Talk about making a positive impact, talking about improving people's mental health, talking about making sure people have actually got someone to talk to, that they've got books, that they've got food, they've got heating, they've got a roof.
But why wouldn't they have it? Why wouldn't they have food? Why wouldn't they have positive mental health? It's the politics, it's the political decisions that happen within society.
That's not what we're talking about in terms of community organizing, right? So
but if you do both, so if you have a community, we should all want a community that helps each other. I'm 100% with you on that. Completely agree that everybody should want to do good by their community, and we should all want everybody to be happy and hopeful. But if you only do that and don't deal with the political element of it, you're always going to have a need.
But that's how the political element will sort out, because if the Labour Party do that, they will win in a landslide.
But you've got to sort the politics. The politics is creating a need. So if people aren't being paid well, if people's rent is too high, if all these things are happening, you end up needing food banks, you end up needing, you know, a community to rally behind because people don't have enough, or you need all these advice centres for people who are getting kicked out of their homes because rent's too high and we don't have enough social housing. Unless you sort the community organising is only a surface layer of activity. I believe in doing both. I think, yes, you've got to have a vibrant community that cares about everyone, because that's what socialism is at the end of the day. It's about wanting everybody to move forward. But unless you have the politics in place, which is, you know, unless you get rid of capitalism, we're never going to be out of this papering over the cracks.
Well, I suppose it depends on whether you believe in there's two kinds of socialism, and this is what I think needs to be sorted out. There's what I would call English socialism, and I come from, I'm in Bradford, and I sent a picture to Ben recently. So when we're not in a lockdown, I drive into Little Germany. I park next to the Impact Hub where I work out of, where the Independent Labour Party was formed, and there's a mural on the wall. Now, if you look at the beginnings of that movement, it was a grassroots movement born out of Christian socialism. And Christian socialism was born out of the non-conformist church. So it wasn't the hierarchical Catholic Church, Church of England, the Methodist Church, it was the Baptist Church, right? Ground up grassroots movement. If you look at European Marxist socialism, top-down, command and control kind of structure. So it depends on which one you want. But I believe if you get the grassroots sorted out, then you get into power. And once you're in power, then you can change the policies. That's rather than you get the policies right and then you trickle it down to everyone.
Oh, 100%. 100%. It's got to come from the grassroots, because but what I'm talking about is if you don't be sort of educating politically against the elements of whatever politics it is, it doesn't matter how much community organizing you do. I think we're verging on what we're kind of talking about at the moment in political education. It's not just about the community organizing. You've got to have the political education there as well, because you've got to have people that understand why the need is there for the community organizing, and why there's a history of working class people organizing together against and for the benefit of their communities. I think we're talking about the same thing, but maybe I'm just not explaining it well.
I think you are, Tina. But what I was wondering was, in Colchester, if you take yourself back to all that work that you did there, how did that kind of play out? Because my worry, and I talked about this a bit with Laura, because I think, she would have similar views to you, Laura Pidcock would have similar views to you about inserting the political and the political education into the community stuff that you're doing. But how do you do that without it coming across as being kind of hectoring, lecturing people and then alienating them? Because I think, I suppose Neil's got a point in a way that people want to see doers and they want to see, it's hard to get that balance right, isn't it?
I think what you do, and I think it's right, that you mentioned Laura, because every time I kind of think about this, I think about her speech at the Durham Miners Gala, where she's talking about occupying every space with your politics, because unless people understand, you probably wrote that, unless people understand, why the need is there to organize, why collectivism is as it is and why as it should be, you end up with this Citizens UK approach to community organising, which is completely removing the politics altogether. And it's like, oh, as long as we all do this, everything will be fine and capitalism can go on. And, this liberalisation, becomes like an accepted form. Like, it's okay. It doesn't matter that, bankers are earning billions and, there's loads of homeless people, because, we can just have a little food bank and it's all going to be fine. That's what happens if you remove the politics from it. But I don't believe in, as I say, this is just quite ironic because I bang on about politics all the time, but, I don't believe in just, going into somewhere and, someone you don't know and just hammering them about, the ills of capitalism and socialism is amazing. It's about when you connect with people, when you're doing the community organizing, when you're involved in a project, you're then whether it be, in your union, whether it be, at whatever group you're involved in, whatever space that you're in. And I suppose I'm talking at the moment as if COVID hasn't happened and my cat has now decided that she wants to get in the way. Is that, you talk about that's where you bring politics in, and you talk about, so if you're working in your local food bank, you're guaranteed to be working with some people who aren't political, and you have the conversation about, why do we need food banks? What has led us to this point where, people are relying on food charity to be able to survive, and that's how you do it. It's just about bringing it into your ordinary everyday space. And I think the more that we do that, because if you look at education, you're now not allowed to talk about anti-capitalist movements within education. The government are now trying to stop any sort of formal education of anything other than capitalism. And we know why that is. I mean, Michael Gove ruined the education system. It goes back to just sort of rote learning. The quote is very famous: an educated population is an informed population. And we know what happens there. They vote again, they will vote for their own interests. If you remove politics from everything, where does people's understanding of politics come from? So we have to learn it, and we have to then spread, that message, to everybody else, and make it commonplace to talk about politics, about, how decisions that are made affect our everyday lives. And unless we talk about it, well, what are we doing? We're not going to really achieve that push for the self-emancipation of the working class people. And that's really what we should be doing as socialists. We want people to realize that within them, they have the skills and the strength to make our own lives better.
Neil, that's not that far removed from what you're getting at.
Well, it's how to have a conversation when we have different opinions. I think I just think we have to be in the 21st century, not the 20th century or even the 19th century. And my granddad was Lancashire miner. When he left his job, he was member of the NUM, and the NUM had 700,000 members. Today, the NUM has 700 members, right? So the point of the Labour Party was to support the working class. Now, the definition of the working class is they work, right? Now, some working class people don't have jobs, and we certainly have a situation where there's unemployment, there's an underclass, and we need to deal with all that sort of thing. But we need to broaden the conversation. I'm not interested in a society for the few. I'm not even interested in a society for the many. I'm a society for everybody. So the working classes, for instance, talk about bankers. Financial Services is the largest employer in the United Kingdom. It's the largest employer in Leeds, near here. The average wage is £40,000. So when we castigate rich bankers, we're actually castigating a small number of extractive, disaster capitalists who run hedge funds. When we're not talking about the majority of people who are working people, who are trying to have a mortgage, have a life, have a job, and a lot of those people are left-leaning, are potentially members of the party, So I think we've got to start talking about a modern kind of socialism. And I think, therefore, what we need to do is have a proof of concept, because we live in an era now where people don't believe experts anymore. They don't believe opinions. They want to see things. And that's why I think community organization is the vehicle, because if you see socialism working, when you're a kid, you go, I get it. You don't even have to call it socialism. You see collectivism working. You go, get it. If you get someone coming in and pointing their fingers and getting all cross about something or getting conceptual, then people switch off, So I think that's what I'm interested in. I think community organization can be the vehicle for change. It should be the central vehicle for change, not just a sort of unit over here. That's my view.
I think, just if I can, come back in, as I always do, to talk about, I think, what where you and I differ is what is working class. Working class isn't just about working people. You're working class if you didn't work for a couple of months and you have the potential of losing your home and losing everything you have. That's what working class is. So people who consider themselves to be middle class are still working class, because they couldn't survive if they weren't working, if they weren't bringing in an income. So anybody that is in that sort of realm, which includes people who are who are on sick pay, who are receiving welfare payments, that's all working class. And I think there's been a real denigration of what is working class, because it was about breaking the the links between our communities, and allowing people to think that, you know, the working class was somehow, you know, a really derogatory thing to be. And, you know, I'm proud to be working class, you know, but I don't, you know, think that, I think, you know, you're right in a sense that we have to bring that into the modern, you know, era. And I think sometimes when people talk about socialism, they start to think back to the 1970s and they think about the miners. But, you know, you see socialism all the time. You know, you look at the NHS, you look at education, these things are all born out of a form of socialism. And I think we have to be proud of that and bring it back into our modern language. And it's not about pointing fingers and getting angry. It's about bringing people with us and saying about how if we, you know, become more aware of our links, that we will be able to work together and achieve something that, you know, the ruling parties are trying to break, which is that common bond between ordinary people. And we all want the same thing. We all want to be safe, secure, happy, healthy, educated. All these things are what socialism is about. And it's about not leaving anybody behind. And we, you know, I think we can get...
I also think we need to move away from identity politics. You know, it's just so old fashioned. You know, the class structure. I don't want to be part of the class structure. So
but you can't get away from it because there is a class structure. Yeah, it's there whether you like it or not.
It used to be. We used to have a very stratified class structure, right?
It's still there.
Well, it's a lot more complex. It's a lot more diverse. It's a lot more multicultural. It's a lot more, you know, in terms of, you know, so many of the old-fashioned labels we put on ourselves are becoming fluid, are becoming changing. You know, so I think we need to forget about labels and start to talk, which is why community is such a great term. You know, because community is a group of people. It doesn't matter what shape, color, gender, whatever they are, you know, but
it doesn't either in class. Class doesn't matter what shape, type, or gender that you are either. And I think if we get away from talking about the language of class, we forget about the challenges that we face. We still have exactly the same issues that if you go back and read something from, you know, James Connolly, you know, who was what, you know,
we've fallen into
it's still relevant today.
This is what happens, right? You fall into a political argument. I think the conversation here is about community organizing, right? So I think this is what we really need to do. We need to have discipline in what we're talking about. Otherwise, everyone gets into having an opinion about everything. And I think this conversation is about community organizing and you know, what to do about it. And I think it's important we stay on that one. Otherwise, we'll just get into another conversation that I think everyone's.
But don't you think that community organizing is all part of the structure in how we're trying to make our society better? And it's all to do with the class struggle that we have, which is we have a class of people up at the top who, you know, you take, for example, you know, how much wealth has been gained by the richest people during COVID. During a pandemic, the wealthiest people have made so much more money. And you think that's what we're talking about. So we should be organizing our communities so that we benefit as a whole rather than these people at the top garnering, you know, so much money. Community organizing all comes from the politics, I think, as well.
I mean, I think what Tina is saying is a kind of a certain view of community organising that I kind of do recognise, and I think that if you look, I mean, we've talked about this again on the programme before about the Durham Miners Association and the way that they did community organising, and they wouldn't have called it that, obviously, but if you think about one of their kind of methods of organising was to develop a class consciousness. Now, like and that was like the organising sort of like the focal point around which people organized, but that would have led them into all sorts of different, you know, like, you know, cultural things that they did together. The Miners' Gala comes out of that, and it all goes back to an identification around class. So I mean, it does exist. That is one way of doing community organizing. Are you saying that is just like, you know, that's out of date? And we need to move beyond that.
Well, we just need to. It all comes back to what are you trying to achieve? I mean, you know, we again, those are political movements, and that's an important part, obviously, particularly things, you know, what you guys are particularly interested in. But you know, if you look at the workers' education institutes are created, the mechanics institutes, right? Public libraries, the libraries movement, you know. so what was happening there was, it was being born out of the socialist movement, but what it was about was providing people not political education, of which obviously a part of that is a political education. It was places where you could get qualified. It was places where you could tool yourself up better. It was nice buildings you could actually just go and sit in communities that probably didn't have any other nice buildings other than pubs. It's that kind of thing, and I think that it's the modern equivalent of that. We do live in a digital era, though. There's a lot more tools available to people. There's a lot more there's a lot less attention available to us. So I think it's what we got to do is get really clever at doing the things that are important. That people want to see. And that will be different in every community, because the challenge of and again, I think this is where policy units go wrong. Right? It's a challenge. Every community is it has different needs. So you can't say what every community should need. You should get the people in there, find out, listen, and then respond to what you're hearing. It's going to be different in Barrow than it is in Harrow,
Yeah, and Tina, to be fair, the results of the Labour Party community organising has been. I'm not just talking about the group that came up under Jeremy Corbyn, but before that, Ed Miliband, but I think it was David Axelrod to do community organising, and all of them have kind of failed on that level, haven't they? They've tried to impose a kind of national structure.
Because they failed, because in the end, they may, in particular, if I look at the most recent one, it failed because in the end, it didn't do what it said it was going to do. And it became, and this is where the bureaucracy of the Labour Party crushes anything that tries to do something that is totally different from electioneering. And that's what hampered it, was that they want community organising is so different from campaigning and electioneering in that it doesn't have a finite moment of ending. It's always listening. It's all because you're responding to the needs of communities. And this is where Neil and I completely agree on this. We get our differences through political discussion, but we completely agree that that this is what it's about. And what the Labour Party did was it promised this. And I think that's what Jeremy was saying that it was going to be. But then you had the bureaucracy going, but we need results. We need results now. And you can't just muster up something just to get a result, because that's a campaign. That a campaign has an objective. It has an end decision. So Save Our Hospital is a campaign. Save Our Library is a campaign. It has something, it has a demand. It has something that it's going to achieve or prevent. That's what that is. Electioneering has an end point as well, because you're working towards an election and there's something that you're trying to gain. Community organising, you cannot give it 6 months and say you must have a result by 6 months. And that's what the Labour Party did in the end. The Labour Party said, you need to act now. We're spending money on this and we need to see a return on our investment. And you think, well, you've spent all this money by expecting something in 6 months and then ending it. You've actually wasted all the money that you've invested, because you've started to gain shoots. You've started to see a little thing growing, and then you've expected a huge, artwork to be performed, within the next 3 weeks. It's just not going to happen. And if you're going to properly do community organising, you cannot say that there is a time limit on it, because the Labour Party should be doing this anyway. It should be training up all the people within the membership who want to be active, how to be community organisers. And that's what we tried to do in Colchester. We brought people in, we were training people and we sat and we did all these listening exercises, and we started to do this within the community. And that's something that, I have to say that I can take away, from my time, is that through doing that, I've gained so many contacts within so many communities in Colchester, because I went and went out and listened, and so many other people did the same. The problem was that the pressure came from within to find a quick result, and then they started putting community organisers to do local elections, and it distracted from the actual project. And then in the end, you just didn't have that beating heart of what it was supposed to be. If you're going to do it, you cannot put that time limit on it. And I think I just think it's an absolute travesty that something that offered so much potential in a time where we should all be embedded in our communities, they've just ripped it out and are looking, and back to what Neil said, 100%, there are two forms of socialism. There's from the above and there's from the below. And we needed to be doing that from the below. And now what we've got is a Labour Party that's completely looking, not even from socialism, but looking top down and saying, we will give you this. We need to somehow, and this is where Ben, you and I have talked about this quite a lot, and I'm very much a believer now that we have to be organising outside of the Labour Party, because it's not allowing us to do that anymore. And this is a time where we need to be organising within our communities. We need to be reaching out and listening to the needs. I'm sounding like Neil again. we need to be listening. We need to be, hearing what our communities need. And, I just think it's a shame that the party of community, the party of Labour, the party of the working people, the party of our communities is now turning its back on listening to the communities. And I just think, where's the strategy there? Because community organising is what we need to be doing now, and we all need to be doing it, regardless of party.
I mean, that's really interesting. Neil, I know you're very much, not you're focused on the local and the things that the as you say, the kind of needs in the local community. But I would be interested in what you think about the sort of community organising strategy in the party. If you wanted to say a few things. I mean, you obviously watched some of that successful community organising, or at least it was the seeds of something successful in Colchester.
Yeah. Well, it's, and this is why I use Richard Dunbar here. It's again, it's kind of obvious. People are intelligent. It's not a case of dropping in when you want to make something happen. It's being part of the community. That's simple, right? So being part of the community because you're interested in the community, it's where you live, and learning to develop the skills. Now, I think the capability development of people to organize. I use a social entrepreneurial structure myself, right? Which is why I think when you look at the Brexit Party and when you look at Trump, they're the two of, we're so caught up in how terrible their politics were, we miss what was clever, that two people who should not, or a party that should not have had any influence, the Brexit Party and UKIP, that only ever had one MP, changed the course of this country. And that Donald Trump, who had no power base and no background in politics, became the president of the United States. How did you do that? They worked from the grassroots upwards and they mobilized people. So I think developing the skills to actually influence, engage, inspire, and mobilize, but around an authentic, good message, that's what we need to be training people to do.
Can I just, sorry, Tina, I just wanted to push you a bit about the Brexit Party, because obviously a lot of people would see the Brexit Party as almost being like a slogan sort of thing, but you think it's more deeper rooted than that?
It changed the course of British history, in a two-party system where no party has ever managed to break through. The SDP nearly did it, the Liberal Democrats nearly did it, but basically it's been a two-party system that a party that only ever had one MP briefly actually essentially brought about a fundamental change in British politics. That's incredible that they did that,
But I don't think they did that from listening to the people. They made out that they were listening. They created they created a scapegoat answer to
but now I'm talking about a different thing. I'm talking about how to mobilize people. So they took a fake message, they used propaganda, they weren't a force for good as far as I'm concerned. But what was interesting was how they managed to mobilize people ground up and therefore completely disrupt the system. And if they tried to do a conventional approach, they would have been effective as the Green Party, because they had about a similar kind of numbers, similar kind of MP, one each. So I think we can learn from what they did, not what they stood for.
I think for me, because when I first met Neil, we really, because we have so many similar ideas on what community should be doing, and although I feel that we have to be more political about these things, what I find from reading Neil's book and his sort of teachings, I suppose to say, is about participation. For me, the thing that really inspired me about it was that if you can get people to participate in community action, if you can get people to participate in something that enables and makes them their own lives and their communities' lives more enriching, better, that what you actually do is you get people to participate in the political decision making within their areas. So that's where I'm trying to say about the two things marry to me. The two things are a connection, because if you feel invested in something, you want that to be better. So I can't remember if it was Neil the other week or someone else. I was having this conversation. I was getting really frustrated by the environment around me at the moment. In some places is just riddled with litter. And I just think that people don't feel that they have a connection or an ownership in any way of where they live or where they are. So they don't mind littering their community. But if you feel that you have that connection, if you feel that that sense of belonging, that sense of ownership, that sense of being part of your community, you want your community to look good, you want your community to succeed, you want everybody within that community to do well. So I think you can't have one without the other. And as much as maybe you want to talk about the removal of the political from the community organising, I think that one leads to the other and both lead to the same destination. I think you have to have them both.
Well, I think we end up in a brilliant place, because I agree. You know, it's the great reveal. Rather than talking politics and trying to convince someone, you do something and they go, "Da-da! That was socialism." You know.
But I think you got to talk about it to them along the way. But you know me, I'm never short of a few words or a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, Tina, you're always going to make the argument for talking about things, aren't you?
Me, never.
I mean, I agree with Tina on some of that. But I do really like, and my experience of, particularly, actually, ironically enough, working in Parliament and working, for an MP, has made me wonder about the way that we communicate our politics. And I think that it's much more complex than we think it is. Sometimes I think, it's classic kind of get your banner out and people will come, stand on your soapbox and people will see the light. And that's a long tradition that, to be honest, and Neil's right that in the past that has kind of, that has worked for us, but in very different social conditions. Yes. And we do have to recognise some of those changes, don't we? We're right at the end of our hour. It's gone really quickly.
And we didn't argue. We didn't argue.
You don't think you argued? Okay.
I don't think that. Well, I think that was just having a discussion.
Yeah, you should see an argument.
Me argue.
But I just quickly wanted to just ask you both, very quickly, just what your focus is going to be on for the next kind of year or two. So, like, just in terms of practicalities and examples of the sort of things you'll be focusing on, just to give people an idea. Tina, do you want to kick us off with that?
Well, I think I've been in a very sort of reactive position. And Neil, funny enough, has been someone who's really, sort of helped me through the recovery of, the whole political experience and, being able to try and look at things through a more, broader and prism and looking at things through perspective. And I think I've come from a position of feeling in pure negativity to now start to see how maybe, I can be more of a force of change again. I think though, and I've said this to you before, Ben, and I'm 100% honest about this, for me, my time isn't involved in local organising within the Labour Party anymore. I believe that, that the Labour Party isn't going to be a force for change for a long time. So for me, it's now looking outside and how can I try to be involved in any sort of organising, any sort of political sort of discussions, political organising, but also organising just in communities. And it's very much difficult, obviously being, obviously because of COVID and being in a new area, but I'm just looking forward to being sort of more involved in political education, which, obviously you're well aware of at the moment. I'm
flying for
quite a lot.
Yeah. No, I think it's really important.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting. And for me, I think, it's important to ensure that we can try and get as many people inspired and just understanding that the challenges that we face are the challenges that we all face. And if we all link together, we can all sort of work against those challenges. So yeah, a lot going on, but I don't think electioneering and things like that are certainly something that I'm going to be looking at in the near future.
Thanks, Tina. And what about you, Neil?
Well, I've got a sort of fundamental belief about, actually people learn by doing, and I always use the metaphor, you don't learn tennis by watching tennis videos. They might be useful, but you learn it by playing tennis, and by getting better at tennis, you learn better skills, and by having better skills, you get better at playing tennis. And so, taking that model really into what I do, and it's the same thing, getting groups of people together to turn out results they wouldn't otherwise, and in doing so, to develop skills. I apply that in making a living with businesses. I applied it in here at Bradford. We ran something called the GROW program at the end of last year, where we ran what's really a sort of 99-day program. We like 99 days because it's 14 weeks and 1 day to celebrate, where we take social entrepreneurs who've got like some fledgling enterprise, and by the end of it, they've turned out better results. And those better results is social impact, although the better results is also about generating enough income to pay themselves. That might be grant-based, it might be from different places, and in doing so, they develop the leadership skills, which is what we would call social organizing skills. So by the end of it, they've got more muscle. And it's really just to take that model and apply it in as many places as possible. Because what I found is people, when they're having impact, they feel so much better. It's good for their mental health, it's good for their social health, it's good for their spiritual health. So that's my mission in a nutshell.
Yeah, thank you very much, and really good luck to you there. And at some point, I think it would be good to have Richard Dunbar on as well. I mean, I know Richard from a while back, but yeah, that would be really nice to get him on, and you can talk about some of those community organising initiatives as well.
Just to say, a bit of a goldfish. He was the last guy I saw doing it. There are many other good councillors in Bradford doing things. I mentioned.
Yeah.
Disclaimer in there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you both very much.
Cheers.
I mean, I think that was really interesting, fascinating, and what I really liked about it as well is that that there was a bit of a debate in there, because I think we need to recognise that community organising isn't one thing, and it is a debate, and if we're going to get clarity about the way forward with it, you can't just kind of use it as this kind of catch-all phrase that it magics away all of our problems. It doesn't work like that. But thank you so much, both of you, for those insights and that little debate. It's brilliant.
Nice having a
cheers.
Fine in politics. It was fantastic.